Hey guys, it's Greg here from Fat Talk. Sorry about the noise. Today we're going to battle a problem that's fairly common in these trucks. I like to call it one of these things ain't like the other. I'll bring you in and show you. Our pump is producing pressure. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Uh-oh. Fully closed. We got a problem with discharge number 10. Let's check it out. Okay guys, there's a couple things you want to check here. This could either be a mechanical failure of the valve, or the gauge, or it just might be operator error, and it's easily enough done. Right now this truck isn't running. It's not in pump, it's just sitting here, but yet we're still just shy of 100 psi on our gauge. So it could very well be that this discharge was open when the other side was capped, and it built up 100 psi, because when you close the valve, you seal between the cap and the valve, and that's where it gets its reading from. So what I always like to do is I'll go over and I'll bleed discharge 10. We'll make sure our pressure drops off. That'll verify our gauge is actually moving. And we'll charge the system again. And if with the valve closed and we charge it again, we have the same thing happening, we know we have a bypassing valve. So I'm gonna go over now and I'm gonna pull the bleeder. The bleeder is essentially the same as, this is discharge 9. There's just a valve here. It says pull to drain. You'll pop that out and it'll bleed off any pressure. Just bring you in a bit closer here. Okay, that's discharge 10. So all I'm going to do is simply walk around the truck. And on discharge 10, we're going to pull the drain. And immediately over on this side, I have water pressure. And I imagine when I look back at the video, we're going to see the valve bleed off. It's also a quick diagnosis of your valve. I just saw pressure leave. I saw water leave. So that valve is still where it was. We probably have a defective valve. So I'm going to close the bleeder again. And I'm going to go ahead and put this truck in pump, and we'll see where we're to. See, there we're at 0. So when I put this truck back in pump, this discharge is closed. This should stay at 0. If it rises past, we know our valve is bypassing pressure past it. Another quick way to check is if you bring the RPM up and down, you'll be able to watch the discharge pressure go up and down as well. So we're in a situation here where we have a valve bypassing. It's fairly common on these trucks. So now we're going to go to the pump panel or the pump house and start diagnosing the valve. Hang tight. Okay guys, here we are at discharge number 10. This is the one that we determined was leaking, or the valve was bypassing. And we're just getting ready to take the valve out of the truck. We'll then take it over to the workbench and put a new seal kit in it. So the first thing I want to tell you is you want to make sure this is depressurized. If this valve has been bypassing, this tube here could be pressurized still. And when you go to open this cap, you might get a blast of water or the cap coming off at you. So just take a second to check your gauge. If it isn't depressurized, obviously you can pull the drain off the pressure. Once your pressure is removed, we'll start by removing the cap. Just confirming that the pressure and the water is gone. All right, let's take you along here. Try to set you up in a position. So all I'm doing now is just removing these bolts here. then this knob, I've already loosened it, but this will come off. And we can take this cover plate off. And that's going to give us a better view of the valve. You're going to notice your 4 mounting bolts on the outside and your pressure line here. This is what tells your gauge if there's any pressure on this side of the valve. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove this line and remove these 4 bolts. Okay guys, we're back. Now, all I've done is remove this outlet here. I just folded it off to the side. All I did was take away the pressure line there, the gauge line, and you can allow the drain to fold down. You don't necessarily need to remove this all the way. You don't even need to take this line off out here. It's just easier to show you with this out of the way. And here's where we're to now. We're looking at the face of the valve, the output side. And I did just put some water into the valve, into the manifold, because when I'm looking at this right away, I already see something wrong. And you can look carefully and see this valve is in the closed position. You'll notice that more of the valve face in the ball is showing here than it is here. And right now in the fully closed position, you can actually see water bypassing. And this is at gravity pressure, so there is no driving pressure behind it. So we're still going to take this valve apart, have a look at it. We'll probably put some new seals in it. And I'm going to have to adjust this valve, and we'll take you along for that as well as everything else. All right, so now my next step. Here's the rod that connects your lever. We use mechanical valves here. Here's the rod. Here's the heim joint. Connects to the valve. The first nut, and then the double nut. I'm going to go ahead and remove these, drop that out of the way. And then on the back of the valve, there's 4 bolts here. It's a mirror image of what you see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll remove that, and then I will meet you over on the bench where we'll take this thing apart. Okay guys, we're back here at the bench. Admittedly, this is a different day, and this is a different valve, but it's pretty well the same valve as what I took out of that truck. I can't always take the time to film everything while I'm working because I am indeed working. And out of my respect to my employer, I don't want to push the boundaries of what they're so graciously allowing me to do here. So what we have here is a 2.5-inch valve, the same as I took out of that truck. This is our spare valve. This one here has already been rebuilt. We keep one on the shelf for a spare, but I can still walk through the exact same process that I was going to walk through, or that I did go through on that truck. The only difference in this valve is that I don't have the lever at the top, the swing lever that would normally be bolted here, but we can talk you through what you need to do there. So here's our valve, 2.5-inch ball valve, plastic seats, missing a lever. If the lever were in place here, so you'd obviously, just for illustration purposes, be like that. One of the most important things, and I forgot my paint marker, but all I do is mark the location of everything. And I say most important just because it makes it very easy to reassemble the valve for quick assembly when you're done. Depending on where that handle's clocked, it depends on where this valve is mounted in to the truck. So it can fit in different positions. The handle is star shaped, so it can go this way, it could be this way, this way, this way. It just makes it very quick and easy to put a mark the body, mark your keeper, mark your handle, then you can put it all back together. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. When you put it back in the truck, you can set your valve to the open or closed position, and you know where your pull rod is going to line up to. That's where you'd mount your lever to then. So we'll just pretend that I've marked everything, I've taken this off. The next step then is going to be to remove this brass keeper. And that just pops off. Underneath that is a spring washer. And again, that just comes off. Now, when you remove this valve from the truck, it's actually stamped on the side of it, open valve to remove. This valve can be installed in either the open or closed position. I like the open position. We'll talk about that shortly. The easiest way to get these, now keep in mind this, like I said, this valve has been rebuilt, it's been cleaned, so it's in pretty good shape. Normally when you see these seals, there could be all kinds of things wrong with them, torn, damaged, burned. The ball could be out of round, that sort of thing. The easiest way to pop the seals out, quite simply just close your ball valve slightly, and then you can use anything you want really. I just tend to use a plastic tool here, and I get underneath the seal. I'll start to bring it up, and then it pops right out. Again, just open your valve slightly, get underneath it, and pop out your plastic seats. Okay. On the bottom then you have a nut here. This is actually attached to your lower trunnion, it's called. Some people call it a slide pin. This particular one is 3/4 or 19. These don't have to go very tight on reassembly, but we'll talk about that. So we're going to remove this. There is, probably should have done this beforehand. Seeing as I put them there. This is called your lower trunnion. It's what helps the ball pivot to the open and closed position. There is a seal right here. And it's just an O-ring seal. This, when you take it apart, you want to inspect. This trunnion can wear. And this is just another stainless steel ball. The hole in which the trunnion rides in can wear as well. So basically that's just going to fit into the steel ball. If this trunnion wears, it can cause the ball to sit sideways in the valve housing. So it would actually say cock the ball that way. And when you look at your seals, then this is where you're really going to start seeing tears in the seal. So if you pull out a seal, and we'll talk about inspecting seals shortly, if you pull it out and see a side torn out of a seal, have a good look at this trunnion and make sure it's not worn. There's a member of the Facebook group, F.A.T Talk, Brad Freeman. He has a fantastic video. I'm going to link it in the bottom. He actually took apart a valve, and this was worn. The trunnion was worn, and he actually had seals that were torn here. So he did a great video on that. I'm going to link that below. Once our lower trunnion is out, we can go ahead and pop off our O-ring. Different people use different tools to remove it. Normally, you're replacing all this. You don't need to worry about damaging it. In my case, everything is new. So we'll just go ahead and take that O-ring off. I'm just going to be careful with mine. There's your trunnion. Like I said, you can, if you wish, take a caliper and check it for roundness and wear. It's probably not a bad thing to do. Also, too, you'll get these out and they will be just absolutely corroded. So take some time and clean off the corrosion. We'll talk about prepping that in a second. The stainless steel, our valves in the open position now, that happens for, they recommend that for a number of reasons. One, it allows any excess pressure that's on the valve to be bled off before you take it out. Two, in my opinion, the valve comes out easier. Three, it allows you to do this with the ball. So, just makes for easier disassembly. So, we've got our two seats out, our lower trunnion O-ring, our keeper, our washer. Now we're going to remove our upper trunnion. And that just simply pushes down. Where the trunnion seats is a bushing, plastic bushing. We'll remove that. I'm just going to lay the body aside for a second. There is an O-ring here on our trunnion that we will remove. So again, just hook underneath it. I'm going to be very careful with mine because I'm going to reuse it. Just gently slide it off. There's the O-ring for the upper trunnion. And then we have a thrust washer, which you don't need to take off technically, unless there's a lot of corrosion built up here. So we'll remove that. And here's our upper trunnion. So here's our valve fully disassembled. Okay, our rebuild kit comes complete with everything in this particular case. We have a full field service kit here. It comes with the ball, the seals, and the seat, sorry, and your O-rings. I'm not going to need this in this particular case because, like I said, all this is new. We're going to do a quick inspection of everything. The body, you're going to want to have a look for any corrosion, especially in around the seat area or the seat area here. Any corrosion on the mounting flange, all that has to be taken off. In here through your trunnion bore, make sure all that's clean and polished. And right here where your wave spring sits, I find a lot of stuff builds up. I also take the time to remove all the grime and dirt from the outside of the body because I don't want any of that falling back in when I'm rebuilding it. Some technicians will take the time to bead blast this, sandblast it, clean it, paint it. That's really completely up to yourself, whatever you want to do. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. If you're going to bead blast it or sandblast it, don't use too aggressive of a material to do it. You want this still to be able to seal and be pretty smooth. The balls. So here's the ball we took out, which I know is in good shape. They are available in both stainless steel like this one. There's also just going to lay this aside here. There's also a plastic or a polymer valve like that, ball valve. Here's another example of one. Pros and cons of both. The stainless steel is the one we use here. We have a rural station here that drafts a lot of water. They can tend to get sandblasted. These stainless steel valves hold up a lot better to scoring and damage due to debris passing through. The other benefit of it is you can reuse these. They can be cleaned and reused, provided there's no damage to them. And maintenance, if this were to be corroded or slightly, contaminated, Akron recommends a 400 grit paper or a emery cloth. I use a 600 grit Scotch pad. So again, you would just take your time and clean up the ball, remove all the contaminations off it. It's also important when you're cleaning your valve body here. The plastic balls have their purpose as well. A lot of it tends to be personal preference or department preference on what they want to use. There is no actual, I did reach out to Akron, there is no actual data confirming it, but everyone I talked to says these hold up a lot better in freezing climates. So if the valve were to freeze, this plastic ball valve holds up a lot better. The only downside to these is I find they are much more susceptible to debris damaging them. And you can see here that this one has been scored by debris passing by it. That probably wouldn't affect the stainless steel valve in the same way. So, plastic, stainless steel, you're liable to see either in. They are interchangeable. You can use either or. It's really a preference on what you want to put in your valve. Now, we're talking about going through and checking everything. When you're checking your valve body, if you have a leak like we have in this particular truck, where the valve wasn't seating right, it turned out, as you're going to see in the end, it was an adjustment issue. But take a couple of minutes and just verify, once you turn the caliper the right way, just verify that your valve is round. And you can do this with the caliper, or if you have really good eyes, you can do it with a tape measure. You just want to make sure that your diameters are where they need to be. And technically you could do the same with the ball if you wanted to take a mic or a caliper and go around it and check it. But you need everything to be round. You need everything to be as tight as possible when it goes back together. So we've cleaned this. We've checked it. We know the body is good to go. So we'll lay that aside. The ball valve we just talked about. If it's stainless steel like this, we're going to clean it and reuse it if it's in good shape. Or a particular kit that we use comes with a new one anyway. So oftentimes we'll replace them if there's any signs of damage. These are your valve seats. And it's important to check over these. These will tell you a great story on what's going on with your pump. I'd mentioned earlier about if you see one torn out, you're going to want to check a trunnion. Well, you want to check them for stiffness. They're pretty hard, brand new. But if they're incredibly stiff, like it's going to crack when you press on it, they're brittle, that's something to look for. Discoloring, tearing, any debris damage. It's all just different signs of what's going on with your pump. And I do have a set here that'll tell a great story. And this is important too. Like if this is the third time, say in a few months that you're after changing this valve set out, you may want to have a little deeper look in to see what's going on, if it's a mechanical issue or an operator issue or something of that nature. So here's a set here, and this is an example of a set of seals that suffered from overheating. And this one here, you can see the discoloring in it. This one isn't so bad compared to this one. These are extremely stiff, like they're actually crunchy when I push on them. This one here, you can actually see the singeing where this seat got so hot. So at some point, whatever pump this came out of, this ended up getting deadheaded or producing a lot of heat for some particular reason. And if you see this on a regular basis, like every time you do these seals, they're bypassing and you see this, you may want to look into why it's doing that. And these seats are available in all different sizes depending on what size valve you're working on. So always take the time, like I said, to check, especially in these bigger ones, for tears. Sometimes you'll see them tore out in here. Could just be from something passing through the pump, or like I had said a couple times now, it could be from this trunnion being worn. Your two trunnions, have a look them over. Look for any obvious scoring or damage, denting, especially down here where the thrust washer sits. You see that grooved up a lot. And then again, I'm going to take the same 400 grit paper or Scotch-Brite and clean everything up. Some guys do use Brasso on them because it does dissolve the top layer of corrosion. It's completely up to yourself too. There's more than one way to do it. Same thing, like I said, take a second and just make sure that your trunnion is in the round. Because this one's pretty important. Like, this is what keeps that ball valve set where it needs to be, so that all sides of this seat are going to seal against it. Because what happens if the ball is off, it could be in the closed position, and now you've got a gap there if your trunnion is worn. Spring washer is pretty straightforward as long as it's springy. If you see it completely flat, there's something wrong with it. Plastic bushing, same thing, looking for any tears, wear, a major discoloring, brittleness. Just take your time and check everything over. Thrust washer, looking for any major scoring in it, any obvious signs of damage. And the same with your keeper. Just have a look over. You can clean this as well. It shouldn't be bent out of shape or have any scoring in it. Okay, we're now ready to reassemble our valve. Checking over your components is very important. Now that we know that our components are good, here we go. Here's our valve body. Here's our upper trunnion. Now there's an O-ring that goes on this, like I said. We're going to talk about, and I'm going to put, this thrust washer goes on first. I'm going to put it on now because I always forget it, and then I put my O-ring in place. So thrust washer. This O-ring here, we're going to talk about O-ring lubrication. There's all kinds of different opinions on what it should be. You can use, the recommended lubricant is actually Parker O-Lube. And it is a petroleum-based lubricant for these O-rings. If you don't have that available, Parker recommends any other petroleum-based lubricant. Me personally, I just use regular Sunlight soap. And there's a couple of reasons. Even when you're using the lubricant, you don't want to put too much on it. You literally just want enough to lubricate the O-ring for installation. What happens is, if you put too much lubricant on here, it won't wash away with the water. Because it's petroleum based, the water is going to hang on to it. What happens then is as dirt debris passes through this valve, it's actually going to stick to the grease. And then as you turn this trunnion open and close, all you're doing is it's like taking sandpaper and working it into the valve. So a little bit goes a long way, and a little bit will lubricate the O-ring for installation, and it'll be enough that it won't collect any dirt or debris. The reason I use soap, and all I do is I put a little, I mean, you don't need very much. This is just plain old Sunlight soap. It's water soluble. It goes away as soon as water goes through that valve. It allows me to have the lubrication that I need to put that O-ring in place. And it's not harsh in any way at all. The second water passes through this valve, this is gone. So there's no risk of anything sticking to it. So I'll just start my O-ring. And I'll also take a bit and lubricate the trunnion surface. Sometimes you might need a little help from a flat pick. These picks here are actually from my transmission days. They were for transmission seals, so you didn't damage them, but they work marvelous here. So you just slide that down, and that will pretty well fall in place. There you go. A little bit of soap. You can wipe the excess. The same thing, I'll take just a little bit of lubricant on my finger. It's just for installation purposes. We'll work it around there. So, now our upper trunnion fits in place, and you'll feel it pop into the detent there, which is where the O-ring is seated. And then I'll just turn it to make sure everything's seated. Next comes our plastic bushing, which is just going to fit down in there. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm going to show you, or I'm going to try to show you, there's some notches in the valve here. And this is where, when it comes time to put it in, this keeper has to fit. So I see these put back together oftentimes with the keeper over here. They're designed to be put in here and it'll actually snap into place just very gently. So here's our spring. That's next. And now our keeper. And when you line up the keeper, oh, that one fell right in place. Sometimes you might have to give it just a little tap. And then if this is where we had our lever, we would put our lever, I'll use this as a demonstration. We'll put our, yeah, smooth. Technical malfunction. Okay. Spring, keeper. Okay. If we had our lever, this is where we would put this on, line up our marks that we took earlier so that it's clocked right. And there's a 3/4 bolt that goes in the top. But unfortunately, I don't have that piece here right now. But you can visualize it. Like I said, the marks were simply just to clock it so that you know you're putting it back the same way it came out. Not the end of the world if you didn't, or the marks are wrong. You can reclock it when you get it in. Okay. So, now we're going to take our ball. The valve has to be in the open position to install the ball. So that's basically where this is going to be facing straight ahead. And the ball simply just, there's a notch, a groove in the ball. And that's going to fit into the bottom of the trunnion, sorry. And you just tilt your ball sideways, and it literally will drop right in. And that's what you should see. Now I'm going to lay it down on its side. Our lower trunnion right here, we've checked it, we've cleaned it. Now the same rules apply. Now, the only thing you got to be careful of here is there is a threaded section on this trunnion because it does screw into the bottom of the valve. Some technicians will put a little piece of masking tape over this, or electrical tape works well just to protect the seal. I just usually put a bit of soap there just to help it slide over. And you just take your flat pick and very carefully, just take your time, work that O-ring around, and it will literally fall right in place. When you look through, there's the hole in the valve. The hole here just has to line up. It will fall in. Just always start this by hand. Remember, this is brass, so it will strip very easily. And that's all we need. When you tighten this, it doesn't need much. You're just enough to snug the O-ring into the bottom of the valve body, and there we go. Okay. So our valve, at this point, my valve is open. And you'll feel it sort of fall into where it needs to go. And then you literally just need to push it in by hand. Some people tell me they use a little rubber mallet or plastic mallet to help tap that in. That's completely up to yourself. I just push them in by hand usually. You're going to get them a little bit dirty when you're putting them in. I just usually take a rag after, try my best to clean them up before they mount to the flange. I will, however, when I have this one installed, when I'm going to push the other one in, I'll put a rag down and lay that on that just to prevent any possible damage to the seat. Here's our other seat, same thing, our valve is in the open position. This just sits here. You'll sort of feel it line up, and then you can push it right in by hand. So, now our two seals are in. And then I'll just work the valve open and closed to make sure everything's okay. Okay. When you're going to reinstall, oh, my seat popped up there a bit. When you're going to reinstall this into the truck, this can be installed either way, open or closed. I find it better, and this is just my personal opinion and what I've experienced, to install it in the open position. When you close this valve, when everything is bolted in the closed position, the closed valve will flex these seats slightly outwards. And I just find it makes the valve a little bit more wider. We're not talking very much here. There is a potential, in my opinion, that you might cause some damage to this seat when you're putting it in. I believe the official Akron sheet that I read said, put the valve in open, bring your flange bolts, all 8 of them, pretty well snug but not tight, close the valve, and then tighten your flange bolts. So I will open the valve like this, and this is how I'll put it in the truck. So I think that's everything I have for you. That's pretty much the same for most any of these valves. There are different generations of these valves, but with the exception of the upper trunnion is a little different on the newer ones. It has Allen bolts that hold everything together. But essentially, this is the same procedure for pretty much every valve you're going to rebuild of this style. And the kit, like I showed you the kit earlier, this particular kit has the ball and the seats and the O-rings. You can just get a seat kit and an O-ring kit without the ball. So you do have options there depending on what you need. The recommended lubricant again was Parker O-Lube. And you can get that, let's turn it the right way for you. You can get that at your local Parker dealer. Or like I said, the Akron data sheet says you can use any petroleum-based lubricant that you wish. And I've just had good luck using Sunlight Soap, and it's readily available here. So guys, I hope this has answered any questions you have. I'll meet you back at the truck there now, where we're going to proceed with putting the valve back into the truck, and then we'll do an adjustment. Thank you. All right, guys, here we are back at the truck. We've got our valve rebuilt. We're going to talk about surface prep here now. And you'll see there's a bunch of scale and rust on there. So I just use a bit of 600 grit Scotch-Brite. Just polish that valve there. Okay. Now it is personal preference, but I'll always use brand new hardware when I'm putting my valve back together. Justin's under the truck there doing a separate job. I'm pretty sure he's getting a little dripped on there. Okay. Okay, just gonna back you guys up a bit there. And we'll install our valve. One important point I should mention, you want to install these valves in the open position. And the reason is when you close it, you do push out on the seals. And if the seals are pushed out, you could squat or potentially pinch the gasket when you're putting it together. So always install your valve in the open position. That's okay, buddy. Carry on. Yeah. Stay tuned. We got a cure coming up to fix this, and it doesn't involve replacing it. Okay. That's our valve installed. All right, here we are back at the valve. We have it installed on our truck. And as we noticed first, when we took it apart, this isn't adjusted right. And you can actually see water just at gravity pressure is leaking out. So we've gone through this valve and we put in new seals just because we've had it apart, but in essence, we haven't fixed the problem. The problem with this particular valve is the ball center is out of adjustment. And there's a couple things I'm going to show you if I can get this tripod to work. So you come inside here. Justin, you have confirmed the number 10 is all the way closed, right? The lever? Yeah. So number 10 lever is all the way closed. And here's our valve. So this can't physically move anymore now the way it's currently set up. And we look, our valve is not, our stop is not against the seat. I can actually fit the top of my thumb in there. So this needs to move this way, and that will in turn give your valve that little extra bit it needs to seat that stainless steel ball valve. Okay, before we put the outlet here and everything in place, I'm going to leave this open so that as we adjust the valve, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing and how I'm centering that ball valve in the middle of that seal. As it turns out, this was a good valve to fail because it's a little bit different than adjusting a normal one. A normal pull valve, let's just get up in the pump house here. A normal pull valve would be just a straight rod from the control lever right to the valve. You would just crack this nut, just like a tie rod end, and twist your rod in order to move this valve forward and backwards, thus making your adjustment. This one's a little different because, and this is a little bit difficult to get the camera in here. It's a rod that comes from the other side, and it comes to this lever, which changes direction of pull and transfers it here. So power gets pulled from here, pulled back, and in turn pushes forward. And what happens if you try to adjust the valve, and I did back off the nuts to show you. So here's the rod I'm going to try to turn. Because it's threaded on both ends, you're not actually doing anything. You're just spinning it. And it's not actually going to move the valve. You need to make your adjustment right here. And you're going to pull this lever forward or backwards. Now, it normally would just be as simple as loosening this nut and twisting this rod. But we have a very uniquely shaped rod here. It's bent in 2 or 3 different positions, as you can see right here. So it's not going to turn. So what we do in this case is, and I've already taken the bolt of the nut off, we will lift out the heim joint. There you go. We're going to push all the way back on that. Then we're going to come over. I'm sorry for making you seasick. We're going to come over now and check our valve. And as you can see now, we're dead up against our stops. And then we'll come down, and now we can see our stainless steel ball valve is perfectly centered in the seals. So right now, this valve is going to seal. Now, to make that adjustment up here where we need it, and again, just you can see this rod has all kinds of bends and stuff into it. We'll size up where this needs to go. I'll get my hand out of the way for you. So you can see we got to move this heim joint ahead a bit. And we can do that if it isn't seized by just twisting the joint itself. Alright, I'm going to need a little bit of heat. I'll be right back. Okay. Take 3, take 4, whatever we're at now. We say that a lot around here. Okay, so now we're going to just turn heim joint. Again, we're going to just set our lever. Oh. Sorry guys, no fancy camera equipment, just doing the best I can with a cell phone. And we'll check to see where we're to. So we still need another bit there. As you can see, we're not quite center where we need to be. So we'll go ahead and turn another bit. Okay, so I'll take this nut off now. We'll line that up in the hole. So I still need a little bit more. And basically you're looking for this stud to fit nice and evenly straight down into that hole. Close. All right, so now when we look at it, let's get down here. Now when we look at it, our linkage is in place, and when we look at our stop, it's bottomed out against where it's supposed to be. And then when we come down here now, and we look at that ball valve, the stainless steel ball valve, it is centered where it should be. So we know now that we're properly adjusted, and that when we close that valve, it's going to leak. Or we hope not. When we close that valve, it's not going to leak. Remember to open this valve before you bolt your outside flange on. You want that valve open so that you don't damage these seals. Hey guys, it's Greg from F.A.T Talk, a group for fire apparatus technicians. I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who has supported F.A.T Talk through the purchase of F.A.T Talk swag, such as this t-shirt or this hat, our F.A.T Talk challenge coin, F.A.T Talk stickers, anything like that. Your support has gone to help create programs such as the F.A.T Talk EVT scholarship, and that's a scholarship where we give a deserving technician who probably had a financial roadblock to writing an EVT exam. We look after their exam fee for them and they can write their test. And all this is made possible through all this support. As you can imagine, with a growing group, we've been expanding into YouTube, expanding into a website, fattalk.ca. All of this does come with an added cost. There's administration costs to shipping out the prizes for the contests that we do. I live in Canada. The bulk of you guys are in the United States. There's brokerage fees involved for receiving packages and that sort of thing. The support is helping to cover that. I am in desperate need of some new equipment to help better do the YouTube channel. My computer is not, it's pretty much on its last leg, and it's not liking me a whole lot since I tried to use it for YouTube video editing. So we have set up the Buy Me a Coffee program, and I must thank my administrator, Jonathan Garland, for finding that. Really appreciate it. Basically, you can go in and do a one-time small donation, buy me a coffee, or you can set up a monthly reoccurring payment so that every month some money is donated to F.A.T Talk. Then it's completely your choice, the amount. I do believe the minimum is $2. So I'll set the links for all this stuff below. I want everybody to know that I don't take any revenue from this at all. Every cent that's generated by this group goes back into the group, because I believe technicians helping technicians is what this group is all about, and that's what I want it to do. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. This group has surpassed my expectations, and I'm only just getting started. And I look forward to talking to all of you soon. Never stop learning, never stop teaching.